Thank you very much to all. Can you all hear me well? Yeah. I'm well aware of two things. My German is not good enough to give you a talk in German, and I'm the last thing standing between you and lunch. So I'll try to be as exciting and short as I can. As I was said, I'm a psychologist, and I'm interested in decision making. Today, what I want to discuss with you is 5 things. First of all, I'll tell you why I think behavioral science can really help healthcare managers and people involved in healthcare. The second thing is I'll take some, I would say, classic behavioral economic principles, and I'll tell you how they can be applied to healthcare. Then I'll flip it around. I'll take some key healthcare issues, and I'll tell you why and how behavioral science can help you to tackle these. Point 4 is about making you aware that when you think about behavioral economics, it's not all good, it's not all the best new thing. You have to be careful when you use it. And I don't want you to leave this talk and this symposium today thinking that behavioral economics is the only answer. So I'll give you a critical perspective in point 4. In conclusion, I'll give you some areas to look out for the future of behavioral economics in healthcare. Let's try to start thinking, why do we need healthcare? Why do we need behavioral inputs into healthcare? When you think about the decisions that are unhealthy decisions, quite often they are paradoxical decisions. Texting while you're driving, for instance. Why would people do that? What is the benefit of sending a text, a very short text, to maybe set up a dinner, when actually the consequences are that you might end up in a car crash? And these are the types of paradoxical decisions that economists and people involved in behavioral economics are actually interested in. Second reason why I think behavioral science can help us better understand how healthcare decisions work. Certain categories of the population do not really understand the consequences of their behaviors. And that's very true of teenage smokers, for instance. You can be rational with a teenage smoker. They will not understand that the consequences and the visible consequences of their behavior will arrive at a much later stage. What they're concerned about when they're teenagers is the potential cool factor of smoking. Third thing, quite often in healthcare, patients have to make complex decisions. And complex decisions can be framed in a way that lead patients to make decisions that are better for them. So for instance, if you think about tossing between having a hip surgery replacement or sticking to drugs, this is a complex decision. For quite a few patients, this is not an easy one. And again, behavioral economics can help us understand how to frame decisions, how to help patients to make better informed decisions. Another point, point number 4, some healthcare matters, some healthcare questions require consistent behaviors, require people to behave all the time the same way, or the treatment will not be efficient. And again, behavioral economics is quite good with this, because we know certain principles that can nudge people into adopting a more consistent behavior so that their treatment become more successful. But last and not least, I wanted to say that we are experiencing some limitations in the way we've approached persuasion in healthcare to date. So rational prevention campaign seems to be stalling. It doesn't really work anymore. People know that they're engaging in behaviors that are not right for them, but they decide to stick with these unhealthy behaviors. Things like shock advertising, which was very much in vogue in the 80s and 90s, is also stalling. That is, we're in need of something else. In addition to that, healthcare is facing a double challenge. We're asked to produce more efficient policies, more efficient products, and at the same time reduce costs. And that's where behavioral science and behavioral economics can come in. It tackles both cost and efficiency by trying to test and use randomized controlled trial to find the best way of answering the questions, and it's evidence-driven. Healthcare is very much a field that is evidence-driven, and so is behavioral economics. What I'm going to do now is I've selected 5 principles which according to most of the healthcare, both healthcare and behavioral economics experts, are the ones that are the most widely used and the most interesting for healthcare managers and practitioners. Now, what you'll see is some of them are very simple, in fact. Not all of them are complex psychological plots. Some of them are very simple. And what I'll do is for each, I'll explain you what they are, why they work and how they work, and I'll give you some example of how they can be used in healthcare. The first one is default, setting default rules to people. Basically, default rules is telling people what they have to do. The reason why it works is first that it simplifies the decision making. In other words, you make a choice for people, and actually people thank you for that. People hate making decisions because it takes a lot of what we call cognitive resources. In other words, it makes them think a lot, and people are always looking for a way not to think too much. People do not like to make also the costly effort to change a default option. So if you are setting a default for people, if you say eat 5 a day, they'll eat 5 a day, or they'll try to eat 5 a day. The cost of disagreeing, the cost of changing a default option is higher than the cost to simply go with this option. People don't like to disagree. So if you set a default, they'll be keener to stick to that. So how this can be used in healthcare? 5 a day campaign. So you tell people that the default to be healthy in terms of what you're eating, the default, the norm is 5 a day. A very interesting study was done suggesting that if by default you register individual on the organ donation list, people are less likely to opt out of that list. And I'll show you, I'll illustrate that on the following slide. There's many ways in which you can use default. So for instance, some governments across the world are encouraging companies to sign employees by default in terms of health insurance, for instance. So whenever you set a default, people are more likely to stick to that default. And the results and the differences can be striking. Let's look at the following. What you see, it's comparing the rates of people that are on the organ donation list. And what you see is you've got countries in which this rate is very high and countries in which the rate is lower. And what Johnson and Goldstein did when they were comparing these countries with these countries was simply to say, what is the difference? What happens? Is that people in Belgium or Austria are much more generous with their organs than people in the UK or Germany? No. The simple answer was that by default, in the countries on the right-hand side here, people were registered on the organ donation list. So they had to opt out of that list. So the default for them was to be on the list. For the countries on the left-hand side, the default was not to be on the list. In other words, they had to opt in order to be on the list. And that shows you the power of setting defaults. People, most of the time, will stick to the default rule. Something related is using social norms in a way to nudge people's behaviors. So what are social norms? Social norms refer to what is commonly accepted or expected from people. And the reason they work is threefold. First of all, again, simplifying decision making. If everyone does it, it must be right. Individuals do not want to stand out. So if everyone is seeming to do something, they will not want to be the only one not engaged in this behavior. And again, it simplifies decision making. And what we know from a psychological point of view is that anything you can do to simplify decisions will mean decisions that go in the way you want them to go. Now, how can social norms be used in healthcare? First of all, incorporate social norms in messages. Studies have shown that simple messages such as 9 out of 10 people arrive at their GP appointments on time, is enough to dramatically reduce the number of people that do not show up on time. Martin and colleague in 2012 did a study where they estimated this to be around a third reduction in terms of non-compliance. Share recommendation, reviews, all the things that can show that there's a norm, a consensus on a topic. This can also be used inside healthcare units. So for instance, there was a study done where they showed that by simply monitoring in critical healthcare teams, units washing their hands and giving them feedback was enough to actually give people and raise the use of this. I'll talk about feedback in a moment. Ease and convenience. Now, that's a very simple way of nudging people. But often, ease and convenience is not going the way we want. This is a typical supermarket scene that you'd see all around the world. What you see is that as you're approaching and you're about to pay, you see all these tempting items that are just there, just ready to be grabbed. Now, this is nudging people to be unhealthy. Why? Because it's easy, it's just there, and there is further psychological mechanism going on, which is ego depletion. And what it means is that you've been, all through the alley of the supermarket, you're exhausted, tired, and your willingness to resist temptation has been lowered through a 1 or 2 hour, journey in the supermarket. So this is very typical situation, and unfortunately, it's directing us towards the wrong behavior. So how can we improve this? And design environment that actually nudge people to do the right thing. So what makes the desired behavior easier to engage in means that the desired behavior will be preferred. Now, the way you can use this and why it works is, again, that it simplifies the decision making. So cognitive economy, that's basically a kind of psychologist word for laziness. But cognitive economy means that we don't have a lot of cognitive resources, and we're going to always look at a way to reduce the efforts it takes to make decisions. The other thing is related to a concept from the 1950s called affordances. Is individual will naturally engage in a behavior where it's easy to engage into. And I've got a slide. The next slide, I'll show you an example of that. And finally, behaviors are adopted if they are easy to adopt. Some studies in healthcare that show how easiness and convenience can improve things. Making healthy food more visible and accessible. So in the study that they've shown, which rather than having unhealthy food or junk food near the cashier, you replace it with healthy snacks, people have the same tendency to buy the cashier, but you end up nudging them towards something that is actually good for them. Other field, but still in healthcare, make it easy for people to change appointments. Studies have shown that if you make it easy for people to change appointment with an app or a text system, and if you ask them something very simple, will you please call if you won't be able to keep your appointment, you can dramatically reduce the number of patients that actually miss their appointments. This one is a personal favorite. This is the French National Railway. They wanted to test customer satisfaction. You've got 2 options. You push a button if you're happy, you download an app, and you fill in a form if you're not. Nudging, it's the person who designed that was probably a very, very clever person, but this is the example of what we don't want to do in that case. Always good to use the French National Railway system. Now, warnings. Another, again, example that shows you that all the behavioral economics principles do not have to be very complex. What are warnings? Visual elements calling for immediate attention. Now, why they work? It's evolutionary based. We've evolved to take fight or flight decision, very snappy decision. So anytime we see something with a warning that is there to catch our attention, we're going to pay attention to it immediately. They also use as a shortcut, as a heuristic, as was mentioned in one of the previous talks. And again, they simplify the decision-making process. They make the decision more straightforward for people. How they use in healthcare? Well, this is called the traffic light system. So you've got a green, you can go for it. Orange, be careful. Red, careful, danger. Very simple thing. It's been used in many things, from labels to company restaurants using it, so labeling food at the canteen to make sure that people were aware of what they were engaging in. Immediate warnings, and people adjust their behaviors as soon as they see these. Of course, there's one industry in which it's been used extensively, and that's the smoking industry. And countries have been very strict, especially in certain parts of the world. This is the Australian attempt to cut down smoking. So not only do you have a neutral packaging, but basically everything is about prevention. Now, what we see is, and this is again perhaps jumping to the limitations, but we see that at some point things stalls. So there's a warning limit where at some point, having more and more and more warnings will also have its limits. But something as simple as a traffic light system is one of the simplest and cleverest way to nudge people into better decisions. And the last one I want to cover before jumping to case studies is giving feedback. Now, giving feedback is about giving personal, quantitative, qualitative information on someone's performance in relation to a treatment, in relation to exercising, in relation to many different things. The reason why it works is it's personal, and that's the important thing. Individuals are motivated, they're interested in doing well. They also don't like to change. So if they can be consistent, they'll be following this. They're willing to adjust their behaviors if they know where they stand in comparison with a treatment, with a cohort, or else. Yet, individuals struggle to naturally monitor their performance. You've got the pessimistic, that think they always have it wrong. You've got the optimistic, that think they're doing way better, but they're in the red zone that was showed in the previous talk. How do you make sure that people are accurate in terms of their self-perception? Well, that's by giving them personalized feedback. And finally, one of the reasons it works is that feedback makes consequences of a treatment or a bad behavior more salient to the patients. Now, in healthcare, it can be used in different ways. For instance, you can convince people to quit smoking by simply giving them feedback on the estimated age of their lungs compared with the cohort of non-smoker. So this was a study done by Parks that showed that simply giving them a feedback saying, you are 25, but your lungs are that of a healthy 35-year-old or 40-year-old is enough to trigger people into thinking that they should start quitting smoking. That's also the study I was mentioning earlier. Armelino and colleagues showed that using real-time video monitoring and feedback on hand sanitizing in a critical care unit improved the adoption of these measures by more than 800%. So feedback is really one of the ways in which we can nudge people to be healthier. What I'm going to do now is flip things around. So in the first part of my talk, I've selected 5 core behavioral economics principles, and I've showed you how they could be applied to healthcare issues. Now I'm doing it the other way around. I'm taking healthcare issues, and I'm going to tell you what the traditional way of addressing these issues have been and how we would do it from a behavioral economics perspective. And this is adapted from the research from the Behavioral Insight team. The BIT, as it's known in the UK, was a groundbreaking unit created to gather psychological and behavioral scientists working directly with the UK government to try to implement behavioral economics and behavioral science right into all the areas of the public sphere. First thing, alcohol consumption. Alcohol-related illnesses in the UK cost us a lot of money. Now, the question is, how do you tackle the binge drinking culture, especially in a university context? Traditional answer is prevention campaigns using guidelines, reminding students that they should not drink up more than a certain amount, for instance. A prevention campaign highlighting the risks of not drinking within certain standards of moderation. Now, the behavioral economics answer in the study I'm going to discuss is doing it the other way around, or another way, so to say. It's by changing the social norms and giving feedback, actual feedback on the consumption. In 1984, the University of Arizona tried something. They wanted to change the perception that students had that everyone drinks a lot. That was the social norm they were trying to challenge. Everyone drinks a lot. I'm not drinking a lot. Everyone does it. My friends, everyone. And they're using posters, flyers, and word of mouth, actually measuring the students' consumption. They tried and revealed the real levels of alcohol consumption. And over a 3-year period, what they realized is that by changing the norm, and the norm of what was supposedly the consumption of students, but by showing that it's actually much lower, they managed to lower the actual consumption of alcohol on a student campus. So quite an interesting example showing you the power of norms and the possibility to change norms by incorporating another element I've discussed in the previous part, which was feedback. Often related is smoking. Again, even though it dates a bit now, this study, but estimated that more than a quarter of all deaths could be a sign at some point to smoking. How do you nudge patients to quit smoking? Traditional answers has been rational campaigns. It's not good for you. Most people know by now. Shock advertising, shocking images of people, terminal illness and so on. Behavioral economics have tried another way of doing things. It's again relying on feedback, and it's also relying on another principle that was discussed in a previous presentation, which is loss aversion. In other words, people do not or worry losing something much more than they potentially want to gain or get something. And what Boots in the UK and the Behavioral Insight team has been working on is an incentive system in which people would lose or keep rewards if they would pass regular smoking tests, saying that obviously they haven't smoked. And so that again uses these two behavioral economics principles. If rewards are not too frequent, this makes them even more successful as an initiative. And the idea is that people at some point, it's not just about quitting smoking, they are into a game. We talked about gamification in the previous presentation. They are into a game kind of mindset, and they want to keep on getting these rewards. Diet and weight, again, another big healthcare issues. 6 out of 10 adults are overweight in the UK, costing £7 billion to the economy. Question, how do you encourage individuals to eat more healthily? Traditional answer has been, once again, more rational campaigns, trying to persuade people that they have to eat healthily, that it's good for them, and so on. Behavioral economic answer would be to try to make things easier to shop for, especially the healthy item, to set defaults, and to create visual reminders wherever possible that it's important for people to shop healthily. An interesting study I want to share with you was done by New Mexico State University. And what they did is they redesigned a trolley. And they made a physical space in the trolley with a sign saying, these are for your fruit and vegetables. Very simple. And what they found was not only do people buy more fruits and vegetables when you've created that space that is reminding them to buy fruits and vegetables and easy for them to put in it, but more interestingly, because then comes the supermarket owner that will say, yes, but fruits and vegetables, is that going to diminish my profit? Actually, no. They show that there was no incidence in terms of the profitability of the store when they were having this initiative. So it's a benefit, and simply speaking, all it does is give people and make it more easy for people to buy this. Another piece of research I want to share with you is one that I'm directly conducting at the moment, and it's using fMRI, for those who are familiar with it, to change the perspective of how you show things. This is the kind of nudges you can have in trolleys, by the way. Very simple as this one, and this one I would say is not really engaging, but as simple as this one are enough to increase consumption of fruits and vegetables in stores. Now, what we're doing in our research is comparing the perspective of communication messages. And what we're comparing are 3 different perspectives. This is a neutral perspective. There's no hand on the picture. The second one is what we call a third-person perspective. When I look at this picture, it's the hands of someone else. And this is a first-person perspective. This is my hands. It's like my hands are grabbing the ad. And what we found in our study is that when things are shown from a first-person perspective, again, in my example, it's like you have the hands that are almost coming to you. When you show things from a first-person perspective, fruits in our study are judged more appealing. The intention to buy and to eat fruits increases. Interestingly, what we were testing in this study as well was whether you should have a health message or a pleasure message. And what we found in our study is that a pleasure message actually beats the health message. So at some point, too much health talks is actually detrimental. It's too much in the rational, and people are actually starting to shunt their mind so that they do not receive or answer to these calls. Fourth case study I want to share with you, physical activity. Question, how to improve the physical fitness and tackle the inactive lifestyle that most of the population is living? Again, the traditional answer goes with rational campaigns. You have to be active. Yes, we know. And making physical education, PE, compulsory at school. What behavioral economics suggests is to actually make exercising a fun thing. And also make people exercising without them realizing. Because then it completely changes the relation that people have with exercising. Example, most people are aware of the health benefits of taking the stairs instead of the escalator. But once we are faced with a choice, most of the time we go for the escalator. So how can we tackle that? Well, the piano staircase was a very fun experiment. It started in Stockholm, in Sweden, and the idea was that facing your escalator, you would have a piano staircase. It's not just decorative. As you walk the stairs, it makes noise. And you can actually play and jump up and down, and you can play a tune. I've tried it. It's very difficult to do any Bach or Beethoven, but it reaches its goal, which is make people exercise without them realizing it. The picture on the right-hand side I took in Seoul a few months ago, so it just shows you that this is becoming more widely spread. Teen and toddlers, that's maybe more of a specific UK problem, but again, there are some behavioral economics insights here. Britain has the highest rate of teenage pregnancy in Western Europe, and if you look at the figures, they're actually shocking rates. Question, how to lower the teenage pregnancy rate in Great Britain? Traditional answer has been doing two things. Safe sex campaigns and getting testimonials to try and discourage people. So again, the rational approach. You get a 15-year-old mom of, a 1-year-old, and she tells other teenage girls how horrible it is and difficult it is to basically be either out of school or school and have to take care of a toddler. Behavioral economic answers is actually, why don't we just make teenage girls and boys experience it on their own and see what it means to be with a toddler. Rather than telling them what to do, remember that this is a very sensitive population, which most of the time the only answer that they know is no, or I don't want to do what mom and dad told me, or whatever stays at school is rubbish. That's the kind of things that you'd get with that population. So the initiative that was created by Teen and Toddler, which is a UK charity, was to design a 20-week program where teenage boys and girls would mentor toddlers. So once a week, they would have to go to a nursery, supervise the kids, do all the things that go with it, and play with the kids, experience firsthand what it means to have parenthood. And follows these sessions. There were workshops discussing more about child development, parenting skills, and so on. Basically, putting them completely off being, for the moment, hopefully. There hasn't been a 20-year study done on that. But putting them off completely off the idea of being parents or becoming parents in the next few years. The results were actually quite striking. This was conducted on a population that was at risk, and the participants of the program were 2.7%. The pregnancy rate was 2.7% compared to a national average of 4.1%. This is very high. I don't know if you're aware of the typical other rates, but you're way below 1%. So this is very, very, very high. Now, what I want to do to lean towards the conclusion of the talk is reflect on what we say. Again, the last thing I want to is to leave this day and say, whenever someone at work asks you for an answer, you say behavioral economics is the answer. And I want to make sure that you're aware of the limitation of behavioral economics. So why is behavioral economics not always the magical answer to every problem? Well, the first reason is that application of behavioral economics principles does not always guarantee results. In other words, we use randomized controlled trials, we publish in scientific journals, but just because you use something that's been used and even in published studies does not mean that you would get guaranteed results. And even when it works, and talking more about what we call effect sizes in research, but we can't guarantee that you will get the effect sizes of 800% as the hand sanitizing study I've shown, or even the kind of cutting by a third the number of missed appointments in the other study that I've discussed. when there is an effect, the results are there, but they can't always be to the same extent that they are in all studies. Third point is, don't ditch all the good old incentives. In other words, existing incentives can work very well. Things like taxations or financial rewards, different sides of the same coin, money, can actually work well in many contexts. Another point that is important is effects of all these principles can wear off over time. What I mean by that is that when people get always the same tricks, so to say, they will learn the tricks. And at some point, they will be less responsive, less receptive to these messages. And I guess, again, behavioral economics is the buzzword of the moment. So I'm giving talks to so many different industries to tell them how behavioral economics can help them in their disciplines and in being practitioners. So I guess, there is this kind of novelty moment where we just use it and apply it. But as everything, the first time you see it, it's great. The second time, you're like, I've seen that before. The third, the fourth time, you start getting used to it, and you adapt your behavior. And one of the challenges of behavioral economics and behavioral science research for the years to come will be to engage in more longitudinal design. That is, studying the effect of a nudge, not just over 6 months or a year, which to date is already quite good, but over 3, 5, 10, if possible, because obviously this creates a lot of difficulties on the research side of things. Last but not least, don't necessarily think in silos. In other words, combine things together. Combining things together is making sure that you're going to demultiply the potential effects of your measures. To conclude, I want to kind of open up in terms of behavioral economics in healthcare and give you 5 areas to watch out for in the coming years. The first one is big data analytics. Big data analytics, and especially, so big data is the rise of information we have about patients, about consumers. They give us a wealth of information that is untackled. To give you an example, I work quite closely with the innovation team at L'Oréal, and they've developed an app so that people can try makeup. And they've got 18 million customers in the database. As a researcher, when I hear 18 million, my eyes just go like that, and I'm like, wow. They have no idea what to do with it. And that's illustrating the problem that maybe some of you have in your industry, is that, we're being told to get data because they will make better informed decisions from a management point of view, but we don't really know how to use it. Now, behavioral economics can be very interesting when applied to big data to try to identify perhaps some directions or some biases in the decision making. Wearable devices, this was perhaps linked or mentioned in the previous presentation, but this is a way to provide even more comprehensive feedback, even more personalized feedback. So the more, I'm a keen runner, for instance, so I've got something measuring my pulse, I've got something on my ankle measuring the impact on the ground, so I feel like Robocop when I run, and I've got coach and so on, but all this feedback is actually useful. If there is one thing we know probably works the best out of all of these principles, is giving feedback, telling people constantly how they're doing. Gamification was one of the other points touched upon by the previous presentation. It's the idea that you can now design games that really encourage people to engage in healthy behaviors or follow up their treatment and make sure that they actually stick to their treatment. And you can design all these games with these behavioral economics principles in mind. Virtual and augmented reality. Virtual reality is very good to understand how patients and people make decisions and make decisions in hypothetical scenarios. Augmented reality is very good for using the warning side of behavioral economics. So you scan with your smartphone a QR code, and it gives you instant information about the health benefit or health risk associated with eating these fruits and vegetables or these snacks. And even better, your smartphone's got a profile and you know that you have type 2 diabetes, and your smartphone can adjust the recommendation. So there's a wealth of implementations that you can do in terms of using behavioral economics with these. And last but not least, chatbots. Chatbots refers to chat systems that are automated. They rely on artificial intelligence, and they allow to talk to consumers, to patients, and give them information. And chatbots can actually be programmed, can actually be trained to give people gentle nudges to trigger them into the right direction. So that's all for the talk. I'm looking forward to questions. I guess the most important thing to remember for it is that there's two ways of working with behavioral economics in healthcare. Is you can look at existing case studies, that's what the third part of my talk, and see what's been done on this. Or you can look at principles of behavioral economics that you think would apply to your industry and try to find application for your industry. So two sides of the same coin. Thank you very much for your attention.